Hello, my crafty friends. This is Christian from the Kindred Stamps design team. Today we're going to make a scene card that involves making our own stencils and masking. We'll be using the Teen Detectives for this set. The first thing that we're going to do is make our masks. I'm making two different templates and masks for this type of a card. I'm taking a transparency, a craft knife, a ruler, and then just a mat to cut it on. If you do not have a transparency, you can use a piece of acetate or thicker plastic saved from pretty much anything. The first thing I did was made a 2 by 2 square. This will be the outline that we will be tracing. And then I made a square inside of the square. So this square ended up being 1 3/4 inches by 1 3/4 inches. I cut a piece of paper down to that side to act as my guide for cutting, and this will allow me to then be able to take that centerpiece out. That inner square is about 1/4 inch around the inside of the other square, just to give me a nice border. Some of the other prep work that I did ahead of time was cut out 5 pieces of that 2 by 2 inch square out of masking paper. Then finally, I stamped the flower from the stamp set on some masking paper and fussy cut out a bunch of them. I wasn't quite sure how many flowers I was going to use on the card at this point, so I just wanted to make sure I had enough, and now I have extras for later if needed. With all my supplies ready, it was time to start drawing my scene, but safety first. For the layout of this card, I wanted to have a scattering of photos, just like the old pictures that your grandparents and parents had that were nice and small little square photos. And I wanted to make sure that I had enough room for my sentiment to be at the bottom. So I used my masks as little guides and then traced that 2 by 2 square so that I had something firm to rub my pencil along. These pencil lines were sketched lightly because I knew I was going to be doing some ink blending, some erasing, and really wanted to be able to hide those lines if needed. I did go in with a fine liner pen and decided which picture was going to be in the front, which was going to be the next layer, and then what was going to be the last layer. I traced those in a black fine liner alcohol safe pen. Taking the template that I had cut out that was 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 square, I centered it inside of the square that it was drawn in ink. This was then traced with pencil to allow me to have that border. I repeated this on all of the squares. When all of the squares were traced, I went in and added the fine liner details. Again, being careful to not overlap any areas that were non-existent. So if there was something in the forefront, that stayed in the forefront and I didn't draw lines on it. All of the pencil lines were then erased and the paper was ready to be stamped. When doing my stamping, I'm always going to start with the item that I want to be in the front. So in this instance, I'm going to be putting my dog there. The first thing I did was place down my little stencil that we used. That was the one that had the inside square. I centered that onto the square itself in the inside so that it was on the borders, and then made sure that all my paper was covered because my images are bigger than the actual square itself. I need to make sure that all the areas are covered so I don't have body parts or pieces not where they're supposed to be. Once I had the image in place, I did have to clean my little stencil jig every time as well as the images. Because this little pup is going to be inside every single one of the photos, that stamp also got cleaned multiple times. When the panel was complete, that piece of 2 by 2 masking paper was placed over the top of it. This will allow that image to be in the forefront while I continue to do my stamping on the other photos. The composition of each of the photos is going to have the pup in the foreground and then have their friend in the background. So to do this, I had to cut a mask of the pup that I will then be able to cover so that when I go in with my next person, the pup will be in front and the image will be behind. And I don't have to worry about having any lines from my other characters going through my little pup. When I am stamping through my little stencil, jig, whatever you would like to call it, I have to make sure that I'm pressing firm enough that I can get to that line where there is just that little bit of a dip from that transparency paper that I utilized. This will make sure that I have my image inside those parameters. I will go in later on with a fine liner pen and again, just do any little touch-ups, like draw that line a little bit further if I didn't get quite close enough. Or pull out a white gel pen because I made a mistake. Let's talk about how to make mistakes and how to fix them. So I'm stamping along and I told you how we always want to do the image that is in front first. And I'm just going along, sticking down my little puppy, adding his friend, going through the whole process. But you will see here that I am not on the picture that is in the front. So I am going to do a big mistake coming up here very shortly. I should have used that bottom square on the left and done that card first, placed the masking paper over the top of it, and then went in and added my image. Not all is lost. I still had my stencil on there so that I can have my blocked area that I needed, but you will see that that corner now is inside that other picture. It goes over the white spot and it goes into the picture frame itself. I didn't even realize I had this mistake until I was cleaning up everything. And here I was being really smart and putting some paper down because I was like, oh, I just got to make sure it doesn't come off that edge because his toes were kind of close. So I masked that spot off. I was just in my own little world, having fun stamping. Masking is such a fun technique. Then sometimes you do a uh-oh. Not all is lost. I knew I could fix this. First, I knew that my photo frame was going to have a white border, and I was going to be doing some shading in a gray ink on that quarter. So I just went in with my white gel pen and added white lines over that spot. I wanted to make sure that was really dry before I started adding anything else. Then, because I also did not stamp my image the correct way, in the correct order, I should say, I needed to reevaluate how my layout was going to be in that picture. First, I tried putting the pup over there, and boy, you really could see that elbow in his head. So, well, that's not going to work. So then I did the smart little gal, and I thought, well, I could hide that in her hair. Her hair is brown. People aren't going to notice a little elbow in there. I mean, you'd really have to stare at it to see it. So I decided to stamp her in that section instead, and then put my little pup off to the side. So before I started doing any more stamping, I had to do some different type of masking. I pulled out my scraps from my masking paper that I hold as precious as gold and found two straight lines. I did add those on those corners. You can see that the little elbow is still showing, and that's okay because I'm going to stamp over that. But first I needed to stamp my pump, add my mask, and then add my smart little gal. And I knew that again, that little blop in her ear, or excuse me, in her hair is not going to be seen. With the images stamped, I was finally able to add all the masks the way they're supposed to be to begin with. The final step was to lay out my flowers the way that I wanted them on the card. I decided on a grouping of 7 that were scattered throughout. I went ahead and stamped those and then came in and peeled the paper off of those itty bitty little flowers and stuck it to the paper. I was finally ready to get inky. I ensured that my masks were securely in place and brought in a large blending brush. I went ahead and ink blended one solid color across the entire panel, making sure my saturation was across the board the same way. My favorite part was next, the unmasking. It is always a surprise to me every time, and I love it. All of a sudden, there's a picture to color, and it looks great. The design is finally coming true in my head. I went ahead and colored all of the images with Olo markers. The color combinations will be listed inside the description of this video. You can also get to them on my blog. I'll have a small post there that also has that same information if you'd like to see it written and more accessible. In full disclosure, as I was coloring, I forgot I got a new camera that I could zoom in a little bit better and get closer to the image. So you're going to see me zoom in here pretty soon and you're going to be like, whoa, what just happened? And that was me. Yeah, go me. Yay, me. Technology. Let's talk a little bit about coloring. I am using Olo markers here today. You can use whatever markers work best for you. Just find the tones that look right to your eye. I stamped on Expressit cardstock. This is a super smooth cardstock that takes the alcohol markers really well. It will allow that alcohol ink to mingle in the background and blend so it looks nice and pretty. It makes me look like I'm a good colorist when I'm not the best colorist in the world. Illusions, it's great. This cardstock is super thin, so I know that it's not going to add any weight to my card, and I still can have the look of a single layer card without having to worry about any of my alcohol marker leaking through my card base and appearing on the opposite side of the card when you open the card from the inside. I interrupt our coloring talk to talk about how you just alter it. So my little elbow was sticking out a little bit above her head from where the image was stamped. So I just colored outside the lines and colored it up. No one will know. Well, besides you and anyone else who watches this, but no one else will know. So now back to our regular scheduled programming. We were talking about paper and coloring. So I know when I use Expressit cardstock that my colors are not going to be as vivid as they are when I use my Nina Classic Crest Solarite, either 80 pound or 110, just depending on what I'm doing. It's not going to be as bright or as intense. The coloring is still great. The colors still really are vibrant. It's just they're not the same intensity based off the different fibers in your paper. So when you are coloring and you're comparing yourself, which we know that's a mortal sin, don't compare yourself to others. You're perfect just the way you are. Okay, besides that, if you are critiquing yourself and looking at someone else's coloring and you're using the same colors, you can't figure out why yours looks so much different. It may be the paper that you're utilizing. You have to know how to use the tools that you have, which means practice. Make an image on one cardstock and make an image on another cardstock. See how it comes together. See how those colors blend. See what you like and don't like. If you have multiple different types of markers, do it with multiple different types of markers. Coloring's okay. You don't have to color and have something become a project. I mean, it's a bonus if it can because, you put that time and effort in it, but it also can just be practice. All right, let's talk about why my pup is not colored and I did my background first. I know I going back to what we're actually doing in the video versus me giving you a nice little lecture to say you're perfect the way you are. Okay, I'm done. I chose to do the background first because I didn't want to pull in any of that brown into my background. I wasn't quite sure what blue I was going to do behind my images, and I didn't want to pull any of that brown into that light blue background. The pup was then colored up, and then I went in to even hide my little oopsie of my little man in the top corner um, by adding some shadows onto the sides of my pictures themselves. So you can see I went in with some grays and just deepened that, gave it a little color variation so that I had some dimension. With a fine liner, I went in and darkened my eyes and added any black elements that I thought got lost in my coloring. I added a lot of ink to that piece of paper, which I knew it was wet, but I tested it anyway. You can use your embossing powder to see if your panel is dry without messing anything up before you add any ink on it that is embossable. I stamped my sentiment in pigment ink and then used my Kindred clear embossing powder over the top of that to give it just a little shine. We already talked about how thin this paper was and that I do get a little warping with it, even though it was nice and hot. So I just used some magnets to straighten it out a little bit while I do those fine white details. The gel pen was done, I put it away, and this would be finished. This would be perfect for someone. I wanted to make mine have a little more dimension. I know this was a single layer card, there's no bulk on it at all, but I wanted my pictures to look like they were popping off the page or they were curled up a little bit. To give that illusion, I pulled out a gray marker. I added a drop shadow to the left-hand side of the images. This meant that my light source was coming from the right. By adding this one little piece to the image, it took my card to that next level. It gave it the dimension that I was looking for, and it made it look like my pictures were real. I am so happy I added that to my card. Question for you guys in the comments. Just drop a comment. Do you guys like making scene cards? Have you ever tried masking? What about drop shadows? Have you ever thought about trying that to give the illusion that something is popping off the page when it's really not? I can't wait to read what you guys say because I love masking. I love having this element on here, and it's a great way to make a scene card that just is so simple to mail. Head on over to the Facebook page for Kindred Stamps or the Instagram. You will be able to get so much inspiration there, and I would love to see your posts. Tag us, let us know. Come and play with us. Until next time, my friends, I hope you have a spectacular day crafting.